Okay, so now we will see how I can initialize the widget objects or view objects in runtime. So far we are successful in creating UIs using linear layout and relative layouts. So linear layout, as we know, contains two orientation techniques. So horizontal and vertical. So it keeps the child nodes into either horizontal or verticals. And relative layout is with respective to a child or node, node or parent. We can position it in four directions such as left, right, top, bottom. And primarily relative layout could be helpful if we are maintaining a header footer system where we want to keep the uh, view elements extremely to a top or bottom or left or right. So an effective UI would be combination of both or anything, any one layout. We have couple of other layouts, but those things are pretty easy and probably we'll see them as our requirement grows. I was talking about frame layout. In fact, the relative layout itself behaved as if a frame layout, but there is some sort of distinction on a frame layout as well. So we will see that frame layout section while we cover the fragmentation of UI in subsequent chapters. When your UI becomes so complex, you may opt for a fragmentation. Fragmentation means splitting into small chunks, so we can still create a complex view by fragmenting an UI. So while we cover that chapter, we'll see the frame layout as well. So in other examples, probably we'll cover some more layouts, grid layout or most commonly used layout, but you are free to explore is there any other layouts available, but most of UI requirement, that's what I was talking about, almost some 90% of UI requirement we can very well come over using a linear layout and relative layout combination. There are small other view components such as scroll and understanding the margin, understanding the padding. Would require subsequent exercises, and of course, you need to have a hands-on session. So we'll test them. So we'll be going to and forth between the UI, and we'll see is there any other combination we can put into use. I mean, attribute values we can put in to see various other usages as well. So now I'm going to move on to just remove some sort of code which I just was writing something else for it. And menu system, pop-up system, everything we have, of course, what we saw in JavaScript, and of course we are going to see everything in Android as well. This particular session also going to, this particular session means the training program is also going to contain a case study where I would be giving you a case study scenarios, and of course using that you will get much closer to your Android development, how it can be handled. But before getting into it, I would advise you to finish whatever hands-on, wherever I give a time, you have to make sure you complete all the hands-on parts or whatever we are writing, updating in the code repository. I want you to complete then and there. If anything goes pending, you just take your time, make sure you cover them as well. Okay, so this particular example contains, remember first thing, the set content view we are calling a layout. I'll pick the bet. I have a couple of layouts designing, which I did on the previous exercises. It has some 8 buttons, activity main, the test layout contains some sort of buttons. Okay, I'll start with the activity main because it has some edit text, what we popularly know as input text field. So similar to that, but we are going to call it as edit text, and we have a couple of buttons. So I'm going to use this in this example. I'm pretty much done with these life cycles, so I may not need it. If I require, I'll have them implemented. Not required to have all the activity lifecycle methods in a code unless it is required. uh, unless where you want to intervene whether what happened to a activity, or if you really want to take a backup of the data, then you can think about having them implemented. But as of now, I feel I don't need it. So to keep the code clear, I just removed other methods which we implemented to test activity lifecycle. So going back to this one, the layout, we have some 8 buttons, and of course an edit text. 1 second. A lot of questions asked by my previous batchmates. So I hope same you guys do that as well. They are into a development and they are really seeing new requirements seems to be. Okay, so in this example, we have 8 buttons and one edit text. So if you really want to control them, for example, what if I want to click the button, I want to display some sort of pop-up, or I want to take the user to a different screen, or I want to do some sort of other action-based, functionalities. It may be another activity. For example, a particular application may contain more than one activity where the content may be spread across different views. So clicking one button may take the user to a second activity where some other content may be displayed. Of course, maybe it is for login password validation also. Maybe for any reason where we may need to decide something based on the button click. So how I can handle a button click. So that's I'm going to explain today. So as we know this particular code, we have a various button. I would recommend when you have something a requirement where you want to check or where you want to intervene a button listening, you may have various ideas or various techniques to have that done. But a traditional approach first I'll explain. There may be other ways also that also I'll explain, but which one is better, it's up to you. Some people prefer one way, they stick to one way, and some people prefer some other way and they also stick with that. Some people use a combination. There are various ways, that's what I'm trying to say. One is having an ID implemented for every buttons. So I'll just give a button 1 alone, maybe button 2 also. We'll just detect 2 buttons. Naming convention, I would recommend a proper naming convention would helpful for us. For example, if the button used for a login or if the button used for a register purpose, give a name accordingly so that it would help us to identify the particular action of the particular button or any other widgets in Android development. Okay, so this idea also I'll give for edit text if at all required. Um, say name field. Yes. Yeah. GST. Who? Who call? You call. Come. Who call? Yeah. Ask him. Yes. Come. Oh. Now. For all the tests. Yeah. Let him do it. So, no. We'll do it. Will it take longer time? Let him see it. If at all light required, we'll see it. Otherwise, we'll parallelly handle it. Okay, so I've just given an ID for this. If at all we require any runtime calling or execution in Java. Few things we need to understand while looking at this layout. Remember, whatever we define in layout, I simply call it as a layout because I'm not distinguish any relative layout or linear layout alone. I'm just simply saying a layout. It's all Java classes or Java objects. Edit text, button, or in other words, I should say these are all the Java objects. I mean, there is an object called edit text, there is an object called button, there is an object called, as we say, string. Similarly, it is all objects. It's all classes. So it can be instantiated or it can be initialized. In other words, having a reference from XML. So it's all plain Java objects. I mean, in this case, based off Android SDK, and we can treat them as a simple objects so that we can use it in Java runtime. So how I am going to just explain here. So let me switch back to activity. Hope you remember in JavaScript we had a technique. Once we define an ID, we had a document get element by ID and identifying the ID, then we do something like this. A similar approach we have here for a button. First thing, create an object, whatever name you prefer. Say in this case, just I'll give a button one. The object which I am going to retrieve from XML, and that object would be searched in this XML. So what you have set in the set content view, Java is going to look for an object called what I'm just going to propose. So first thing, I need to make sure typecast it. I'll let you know why I need to typecast it in a few minutes. Find view by ID equivalent to document get element by ID. You may assume it's actually find element by ID. Give a resource. Resource is a constant, a reference what Android maintains to identify anything specified in XML file, and looking for an ID, and ID is going to have an ID name called button1. Few sequence. First, I have an object where a Java object. In this case, the object type is button. I name it. I declare an object, and in this part, the initialization happened, but slightly in different way because the object is already there in the XML. I just need to transfer it to Java so that I can start using that. So, first thing, find view by ID mean it will search for ID what I am specifying here. So I'm going to say in this case search for an ID called button1. Where it will search mean what you have set in the set content view. It won't search all the XML file. Remember, it will search for the specific ID in the layout file what you have just provided using set content view. So it will search for an ID called button1, and it will retrieve an object. The incoming object retrieved from an XML, it's a plain generic object as far as because it has searched from a different file which is nothing but an XML. So incoming object type it does not know really, in fact. So you are helping the compiler to understand the incoming object is of type button. So if you search for a ID called button1, you will get an object type called button. It is just you are helping the compiler by typecasting it so that the incoming object directly mapped to a object type a button1, whatever name. So not necessary this one should be same. It could be any name, but just for a similarity I just kept the same name. So the find view by ID will always search for the specific ID what you provide, having a prefix r.id mean resource and id dot button. For example, resource mean the reference what Android maintains for all the unique IDs or resources, and it is searching for an ID, and the ID name is something. You can very well get, if the ID has been already declared in XML file, you can get the code suggestion directly. So you should see the code suggestion, because if you do not see the reference here, your Android, I mean that particular resource maintaining system might not have updated. So the same ID you need to call and make sure the object is retrieved and treated as a Java object. Now I can do a lot of things with this object. For example, various things. So I can change this text. Set text is a method. I can change the text of the button. So the button text and name could be changed. So I have to test it to get it done. First thing, what is the view we are getting? Let's have that open. Oh, sorry. Okay, so initially the view which I am rendering here is having a text called button 1. So, but what you are going to see is a different one, because in runtime, that too on the top of on create, as soon as the layout is displayed, I am renaming the button 1 specifically, having an ID button 1. So how things goes on, let us see. I hope I have got it. If you see the output, in this case, the button has got renamed. Mean, uh, now I can control everything from Java code itself, even though I define everything in XML. But by having the particular object referred in Java class, in this case the class is main activity, which extends inherit everything from a class called activity. Because since we are yet to get into specifics, I just keep it as activity alone. So this particular thing is going to initialize the object which is defined in XML file and treat it as a simple plain Java object, and now whatever method exposed to this class called button can be accessed and can be put into use. Such a thing I have used is a set text. So if you really want to have an access in runtime, you would have to have an ID, so that can be duly initialized and can be put into use, or can change, you can change the behavior, you can change the text, or you can do with whatever the button can do, you can do it here. So this is where you are transferring an object defined in XML to a Java runtime. Java runtime in the code what you are writing here, so you are transferring them. So similarly for edit text, similar approach. Any name will do. Since I have only single edit text, same procedure, only the typecasting will vary. The name I gave name fit, so I can say type anything. So when the application is loaded, it will have this text already typed in. Remember, not to be confused, like don't give a improper ID names, different ID names. An ID does not exist in this XML, that will throw an error. Or if mismatched IDs, for example, for a edit text you give a ID for a button, those things will throw an ANR. Android not responding errors mean exception errors. So you have to make sure you give a right ID, specific ID, because a lot of developers maybe wondering, I've written everything that even Eclipse or Android Studio does not give me an error, but once I start running I get some errors. It is because of the exception errors. Exception error where it may have failed is the mismatch typecasting, because the ID you are searching for, in this case, this ID belongs to a button, but you are trying to cast it for a edit text. So it's absolutely wrong. So even though the suggestion comes, it doesn't mean you should use them. Suggestion is nothing but only to help you to get an idea about what all the objects being defined across your files or multiple files. So make sure you give a right IDs. In fact, Android Studio is right now pretty clever. Previously, like if you are using Eclipse for your Android development, with Eclipse ADT plugin, you can still develop an Android application, but not recommended nowadays by Android. That won't throw an error. Or if you are using simple notepad to type your code, so should be very careful on using them. So in this case, name field ID belongs to an edit text. Now I can modify its behaviors. So let's see how things goes on. So I have a word already typed here, but since it's edit text, I can enter modify, I can type my own. So, and the button has got it. So having an object initialized in Java class will help us to treat them as a simple Java object, and what is the capability of the particular class can do, you can very well do them, like setting a text, getting a text, or listening the events. For example, button has some sort of event listening, that also we'll see. There are various, there are, I'm going to write the uh, say, so technique 1. For example, in JavaScript, we had a HTML itself had a event listener called onClick. So by having giving a method name, I can start listening the function clicks. So whenever the button gets clicked, I would that would execute a method or function in JavaScript. Similar technique we have here also. Let me, for that I need to go to XML. So this button I am going to listen event. There is a option to add, there is an attribute called onClick, where you can define a function name. So that function name will be executed in Java. So you can give a function name. In fact, you won't get any suggestion because I had to write any function, but even though if you write it, you probably won't get any suggestion here. So I'll directly write some name, button clicked. So let me have the same function over here. So this function prefix is all effect of our JavaScript. So but only difference here is should have a argument called view as a input parameter. So let me try to print a log as if it is being called or not. We already have a tag, I remember. I just wrote a function. This function name has been given in the XML with for attribute like on click. So when button gets clicked, I'm expecting some log to be printed as if it listens the button even clicks. Let us verify it. Make sure it run it. I have a latest emulator running, but it is pretty bad on treating the log output. But anyway, I hope it will work, because in last or maybe in the very first exercise where we tried to see the activity life cycle, we did not get the expected result, because for the obvious reason, the 5.0 onwards Android has updated their runtime. Now Dalvik virtual machine is set to be phased out with which is going to be replaced using another runtime which is exclusively created by Android, which is called ART mean Android runtime. So they have implemented this in Android 5.0 onwards, but it's set to have some sort of glitches still, but it works really well. But I have some sort of issues with the debugging. Okay. What the code ran? Okay. I don't get any output here. Okay, I do see here. As I click button, some logs are printed stating that it is actually listening the button clicks. So if you notice the button clicked being printed here. Even as I click the button, it executes some functions. So this is a exact similar way what we did in our JavaScript, where in HTML I'll define the function name of JavaScript, so that will execute that particular function within onClick. The similar approach in this case, instead of HTML we have XML, and instead of JavaScript we have Java. So XML contains a reference to a function called button clicked. This function should be located in this file where this activity or that XML has got implemented. It is invoking that method as the user click on that button. Depending on the log, I feel we are not probably very good at it, because I need to shift my view between various views. So instead I'm going to write one more simple approach to see whether things are working in on screen itself. I'm going to introduce one small feedback or probably pop-up system called Toast. Toast means a small pop-up. It will stay in your UI for a shorter time. You may have seen it. Most of the Android users, I mean phone users, may have noticed that. Okay. Make text. It requires various arguments. I'll explain them one by one. But before, first argument is context. Context is an instance of your activity. What do you want to display? The text, say button, in this case 1 clicked. How long you want to have that displayed? Say there is a constant already that we can put into use, but I can still define a milliseconds. Say slightly longer, maybe some sort of 2 seconds or maybe 1 second or 2 seconds it will display. And finally call show. Remember, we have to put 3 arguments. One, it requires the instance of your activity, or in other words context. I'll let you know what is context in detail. And the second one, which text you want to display. The third one, the duration, how long you want to show the particular pop-up or toast. And finally call the method show. Without calling this, it won't be shown. So now I don't need to depend on this logcat and see something. I can simply use this. Actually, it is not meant for debugging, but we are putting it for debugging. It is actually for small notices where user can see some information in a short time. So I'm putting that into use for our purpose. You notice the text appears right over here. So I get a notification stating that the particular button getting clicked. Let me see if I can slightly enlarge it. It's pretty bad, but still. Okay, so at least you can see some sort of event listening happening, because I do notice a small pop-up coming in a very shorter period of time, maybe a few seconds, because length long, typically I remember it's maybe a 2 second. It will stay for 2 seconds. The toast is for a shorter pop-up notices. Probably you can give some different look and feel, but it is not meant for user interaction. It will display and dissolve after some time. So for that purpose, we are using toast. We have other UI option where user interaction required. We have notification. We have pop-ups. Pop-up in a way we have to say it as a dialogues. We have other ways to notify the user, but this toast is for a shorter duration. Developers use it as a debugging tool also, or some developers prefer to show some sort. For example, when a user try to input username and password, when he clicks, so if the user put a wrong username password, we can put short duration stating that your username password is wrong, and then automatically disappears. So I put a toast. In fact, it confirms where a button getting clicked. So as soon as the button gets clicked, the toast getting displayed, because the obvious reason we have written the particular functions inside a method name called button clicked. Button clicked is being referenced directly from XML by this way. So on click, button click, so that happens through it. This is technique 1. We have other technique as well. Uh, Button, I'll use the same button. There is a method called set on. So let me magnify first. Set on click listener. It is similar to the same approach what we did in our JavaScript, where in the document ready section we will make sure the button is ready for listening the click events. Similar approach. In this, I reserved in the onCreate itself, hey, there's going to be a button. This button is going to get clicked. So register the event for it. So anytime when the user click on the button, he will be notified. But slightly a roundabout way. It need a event listeners inside. That event listener name is on click listener. As soon as I put initialize that method for that class, I have one of unimplemented method, because it override annotation is there. It is getting implemented immediately, meaning it is a kind of an abstract class, looks like, or abstract class interface, or maybe interface also, because I am not sure. We'll come to know whether it is an abstract class alone or it is just an interface also. So it gets a method implemented. In fact, the on-click listeners are interfaces. I was talking about the need of interface because to connect some different objects together. So it is connecting the button clicks to this particular activity. So when you have the particular interface implemented over here, so anytime when the user click on the button, he'll be notified. Okay, couple of things I need to do. This actually referring at this point the class called onClickListener. I need to very clearly tell I'm not calling this method, I'm calling specific method called main activity. because I'm referring this particular class. I'm not referring this class, because remember inside set on click listener you have implemented another class. This class has a method implemented, so it is wrongly referencing the it actually requires instance of a context which is there in the activity, not in the event listener. So anytime when the user click on this button, he will be notified. So that's technique 2. I'll have to do some sort of adjustment in the coding because I already have some methods added over there. So I'll just remove this button click. Or maybe I'll put this to button. I'll move it to button 2. This one I'm not having anything. No methods it is going to call because it event listener is going to be called directly in the Java code itself. So I'll slightly modify that. So this method is for actually for button 2. This method is for button 1. So anytime when the button 1 gets clicked, this particular function will get executed. So let us run this. So I still get a notification. The button 2 would be receiving it to some other the method which we directly reference. So both the same, but whereas the button 1 listens the event, click listening through this way, the technique which we adopted here, similar to document ready or some other way we did in JavaScript. So this technique too does not have a explicit function calling in XML itself. It will have the event listener registered inside the onCreate method. OnCreate typically an initialization block. It is similar to a JavaScript on ready. So it is similar to that. So where I registered the event listener in this way. This shorten that Android Studio slightly shorten the code. So, and of course, this is technique 2. If you feel this way is slightly redundant, where I inside a function inside a function argument, I have a method, sorry, class implemented. If you feel slightly this looks slightly awkward, what you can do, there is a third technique. Implement the event listener, button listener. Sorry, this is not dialog view. In the activity itself. So remember I'm using the implement keyword. Event listener has been attached to this activity. So it is an interface. And show me some error. What kind of error? Class main activity should implement an abstract method on click. So it has some sort of unimplemented method. That method I need to implement. So this can be called, I'll have another method implemented because this button 1 alone I have it implemented. I'll do the button 2 also. Because we are running away. I don't know whether I have a button 3 defined over there. Let me see to confirm. Okay, button 3 does not have an ID here. So let me define it. The suggestion came because there are a couple of other buttons having an ID in some other layout. That's the reason the suggestion came. So I have a button 3. This can have an event listener added. I'll put the caption here. set on click listener set to this, because this class refer this activity, it already has a event listener implemented. So all you need to call the event listener is located in the class itself. So this, so anytime when the button 3 gets clicked, it will execute this function block automatically. So let me put a toast. So we'll test it. So this button 3 will print a toast output, but this button 3 has a on-click listener implemented slightly a different way. So as we noticed, this event listener has been implemented on this activity itself, and it has been initialized in the same way, but the event listener has been registered through the interface itself, because the interface has been implemented on the class itself. So we have given the place to implement its unimplemented method, nothing but on click. So if you notice the same method, uh, which is here. So I just made it exclusive listener for this button alone, whereas this is a common listener for any other button whatever getting implemented, but still the same approach. So this is the technique 3 to listen the events. So one event directly call, give the on click, give a reference to a Java function, call it directly, make sure the Java function has a input argument called view, because everything should have view reference of the view which is getting clicked. And second one, implementing a exclusive event listener through set on click listener for the button this way. Another one, implementing the interface directly on the top of the activity itself, I mean the main activity itself, and reference it using set on click listener. This will make sure the function clicks called this way. So whatever way you feel comfortable, you can use it. So it is applicable for buttons. In fact, uh, on-click listener can be attached to almost all the views. It could be attached to an image. It could be even attached to an edit text. It could be attached to a text view. Anything gets tapped, it'll start listening. So, but I would feel button is ideal one to have a event listener attached, because a button is look like a kind of a composite image which is having up and down sequence. So clicking it looks like something gets clicked. Whereas if I click on an image, it won't have a up and down, and as if it won't look like a click is happening. So buttons are ideal one to have an event listener attached. Other event listeners, there is a check state change listener such as checkboxes and radio button. We'll see them as well, maybe after the lunch break. And subsequently, we'll progress into a multiple activity oriented application. For example, uh, in this example, I have a various button. What if one button clicking it loads another activity or different screen? So if I want to navigate the user from one screen to another screen, I can use the button clicks. So I execute some code, I load another activity. So different page. In jQuery mobile, we had similar approach. Clicking a button, we loaded another page. The similar approach what here we are going to do, but in this case, it's an activity. So I'm not going to call as a page here. So in this case, from one activity to another activity, I can navigate the user by the click of a button. So after we'll see that also. So we'll get ourselves comfortable with the various event listening options of a button, checkboxes, radio buttons, uh, as well as navigate the user between the activities. So that will may give us another option to expand our application. Once we have a good comfortable understanding of moving between activities, we can create complex applications. such as a login based application. Let the user enter the username and password. When the username password validated, take the user to the second view saying that welcome, you have logged in. And of course that will also open an option to learn something additional such as preferences, SQLite, or database persistency engines, because if I have to give the username password where I need to save it somewhere, so how to save in Android. So those things of course going to continue. I hope you could very well relate everything with the JavaScript, because we just finished mobility JavaScript on HTML5. The similar approach, that's what I said. I've designated the content in such a way you can correlate everything to an Android if you know the JavaScript as well. So that's how we have made the content, but slightly the syntax varies. The syntax is in this case a Java oriented, and whatever the object oriented technique we can put in place to have those uh, I mean events or any other objects initialization to work. So I just created a simple click listening or event listening for a particular button in three different ways. Maybe one more way I can attach, but I feel this is up to more than enough. If at all any other example comes, and on the way I'll probably use some other technique as well. So if you feel technique 2 is good, use it. Or if you feel this technique 1 looks pretty simple, use it, no problem. Or if you feel the technique 3, use it. I don't have any specific suggestion or use this one that. Of course, anything if I need to suggest, that's your application requirement. Sometime the button has to be created in Java code itself. It may not be in XML itself. That time we may have to depend on except technique 1 and 2. Sorry, except technique 1, I can use 2 and 3 if the button itself created directly from Java instead of XML. So scenarios may come as we extend our coding and as we start seeing the complex coding techniques. As of now, I'll conclude the event listening up to this.